so many people signing up and come along. Well, it's a massive relief, to be honest, because turning up here and chatting to myself would have been pretty tragic, I think. So I really appreciate everyone who signed up, who's come along today. So the aim will definitely be to repay your goodwill and make the next hour interesting and worthwhile for you. And we're very lucky to have two A-list guests with us today to talk storytelling. And I will introduce you to them in just a second. We are recording this webinar today, so we can send it out to you afterwards and to anyone who can't make it today. And also we will leave time for questions later after we've heard from our speakers today as well. So hold on to your questions or put them in the chat and we will get to those later. But if we've not met before, then hello, my name is James and I run a comms consultancy called Turn the Page. And Turn the Page is there to help teams and organisations tell better stories and use them to increase the impact of their comms. So whether that is through organisational storytelling, using them to elevate campaigns and content, or through workshops and training such as this, it's all about harnessing the unique power that stories give us. And my story is stories, really. I started off life in the heady world of local journalism as a reporter, and then moved into PR and comms, working in-house in the fire service and then local authority, and then spent 5 years working with a brilliant creative agency called Alive, where storytelling just ran through everything we did. And so I set up Turn the Page last year to try and put some of that storytelling experience to good use. So that is me, but let me introduce you to our two speakers today. First up, we've got Richard Neal, who is Head of Brand and Marketing at Surrey County Council. Hello, Rich.
Hi, James. Hi, everyone.
Hello, thanks for joining us today. Yeah, we're looking forward to hearing your Surrey story very shortly. So we'll be hearing from Rich on how storytelling has played a big part in their incredible success, actually, in email engagement, and also won them the Unaward for Best Use of Email last year, which is the perfect segue to our other speaker today. So Darren Caveney, who I'm sure many of you know from the brilliant Comms 2.0, and who is also creator of the Unawards. Supremo, actually, it says on the screen, Darren. How about that? Ever been described as a Supremo before?
Never in my life, James, to be honest. And I didn't put that, just to make it clear, that those aren't my words. But I'll take it on a Friday. I'll take it.
I don't know where that came from, but there you go. If you're happy with that, that's fine. You sound like a football manager or something like that, I think, don't you? Yeah. So we'll be chatting to Darren a bit later about this year's Unawards, how you can enter, maybe some tips, Darren, on repeating the success of Surrey as well. Brilliant stuff. So, yeah, as I say, we'll let our speakers do their thing first, and then if you've got any questions, pop them in the chat or hold on to them, and then hopefully we'll come to them at the end. And yeah, hopefully we'll have time to answer as many as we possibly can. So before we start, before we hear from Darren and Rich, well, you may well be asking, what is Story Hunters all about? Which is a perfectly valid question to ask, I think, at this point. So since setting up Turn the Page, I've been working and chatting with lots of comms teams about storytelling, which has been a heck of a lot of fun, but also really insightful in terms of understanding the challenges that get in the way of telling great stories. And one of the things that I've found is that it's not always clear where to look or who to ask when it comes to stories. And as I mentioned at the start, I was lucky enough to be trained up as a journalist at the start of my career. And I remember sitting down on that first day and feeling a fair bit of imposter syndrome and thinking, I've no idea what a story is or what one even looks like. And then I remember opening my shiny new textbook and seeing pages like this and, well, feeling a massive wave of relief, really, realizing that there was stuff you had to learn about this stuff, and, you know, you had to develop and hone this story sense. So Story Hunters is all about helping teams overcome any similar blocks or barriers. So the where, the what, the who of storytelling, as much as the how and the why, the sort of practical fundamentals and foundations. And why is that important? Well, why is finding stories, so crucial to our comms? Because it cuts across absolutely every aspect of our comms world, from the strategic right through to the front line as well, in all those different areas. And we need the ability to tell stories in so many different ways and apply it across so many different areas. There's probably things you can add to what's on screen there as well. It's one of our most important core comms skills, and so we need to give it some love. And what is the impact of great storytelling? Well, I always like to try and get Taylor in if I can, because that is the power of storytelling right there. The biggest star in the world today, is a storyteller. She writes songs and tells stories that connect with people and her fans see themselves in. And Taylor understands one of the huge powers of stories, which is that ability to kind of unite and create a shared understanding, just like the 10 million or so people who came along to share in that Era's tour last year. Although from what I've heard, the new album maybe isn't much to write home about, but let's not get into Taylor album debate, so we'll never get moving on anything else. And stories are, they're probably one of the sharpest tools we've got in our comms toolbox, because our brains and our biology are hardwired to stories. Our brains work in stories, and because they've always been fundamental to how we pass on information, going right back to the time living in caves. So we are just powerless to resist them. One of our cognitive biases is something called a story bias or a narrative bias. We'll basically gravitate to something presented as a story and trust it more. Or we'll try and apply a story when perhaps there's not something there, and that's not always very useful to us. But because of this way we're wired, stories make things stick. They make information more memorable, around 50% more, according to an analysis that was done recently of 75 different studies looking at the effect of stories on our ability to recall information. And of course, it's not just what we're being told or how memorable that information is. It's how it's connecting with people as well. How it's putting them in the story, just like Taylor does. And of course, it's what brands like Nike excel at as well. They're not selling you their product, they're putting you in the story. So stories are helping things stick and connecting with people. And that means they give us a really big leg up in comms. But how can we also show the impact of them? And I think there's three main ways in which sort of stories can help with this. One is with attention. We live in an attention economy. People's attention is one of the most valuable commodities going, particularly online and on social. There's a hell of a lot to compete with every single minute online. Around 140 million reels are being played on Facebook and Instagram, and there's 3.5 million views on YouTube every single minute. So stories are vital for helping us to grab and retain attention, because again, we're just naturally drawn and sucked into stories. Number two is on our outcomes. So stories can be very influential on our decision making as well. And because around 95% of our decision making is based on emotion, if we feel something, then we're far more receptive to what's being asked of us. So stories can help us kind of deliver that emotional hit that can then help to influence and persuade as well. And that's huge in campaigns where story-led content can be, really effective. And I've worked on campaigns that seen sign-up rates double as a result of taking a storytelling approach. So they really can help drive outcomes as well. And then on trust, there's big issues around trust in institutions and in leadership. And there's a report that comes out at the start of each year called the Edelman Trust Barometer. And this year it highlighted that one of the ways that businesses and governments can help to start rebuilding trust is making sure that quality information is available to local communities And stories really fit the bill for that. You know, they can provide relatable evidence for people and authenticity that can help to start rebuilding trust. And look, right, it's not all about winning awards, you know, and I'll let Darren give you the full lowdown on the awards shortly. But I thought it was just worth dropping this in at this point. So in the spring, there is a showcase where winners of the awards talk about their work and show you behind the scenes of their campaigns and projects. And it was just really telling this year that every presentation, every campaign, you know, from social to video to strategy, you know, the common thread through so many of those winners was storytelling. So stories can help us achieve, you know, a lot. So it's about creating a story hunting, storytelling mindset across our teams, always thinking, you know, how could I incorporate stories into what I'm working on, always challenging ourselves to think story, you know, activating our story sense so we can build that trust and build that connection with people. And just before I hand over to Rich, I just want to tee him up with a bit about that where and who around stories, which is something that Surrey have been doing so brilliantly. And understanding where we can use stories can really help, I think, in developing that story sense. And I think there's four main areas, I think, in where they can help. The first is the human face, giving a face to our policies, our priorities, our projects. You know, who are the real people who are able to bring those drier details to life and make them relatable for people. But also, you know, our values as organizations as well. You know, we all have values around things like respect and care. So who are the people who are kind of representing and exhibiting those values as well? The second one is connecting with our communities, or, you know, I know there's people from lots of different organizations on today, patients, customers, residents, you know, depending on where you work, but celebrating the real people out there who we're working with, you know, finding the special in the everyday, you know, maybe an achievement, a landmark, something unexpected, but these aren't necessarily linked to a policy or a priority. You know, they can just be stories for the sake of a story that help connect us with the people we're working with. And this is true internally as well, in terms of our staff, you know, connecting with our staff as well. Number three is seeing the impact. You know, this is the evidence of the difference that we're making, you know, the people benefiting, the real world impact. It's what my mate Steve, who is a content editor on the Reach websites, he calls it the so what. You know, what is the human impact of the work that we're doing? And then number four, legend and lore. You know, this is about our, you know, what shapes our organizations, you know, our ethos, our identity. You know, there will be fascinating stories about the history and the culture of your organization. And that's really important, you know, in showing how we've got where we are and why we do what we do. And then, yeah, just thinking about, you know, the who as well, you know, not just the what and the where, but the who can help us tell the story in the most interesting way. Well, there's many different ways that we can come at a story. And for most projects and in most organizations, you'll have big lists of these, right? Stakeholders, people from inside and outside our organizations who we need to understand and we need to recognize. But with a subtle tweak, we can also think about these groups as possible story holders too, and then potentially open up a whole new world of people who might bring an interesting angle to our stories. Or it might also help us think of somewhere else to go if we're struggling to get someone to help us with a story. And I did a story holder mapping exercise with a team I was working with last week, and it was incredible, like the number of different stories and angles that they came up with just from sort of thinking in this way, probably months worth of content potentially. And that's why I think this Surrey story that you're about to hear is so impressive. The way they've been using their story sense to show their impact, celebrate their communities, and achieve some quite incredible numbers with their email engagement. So, Rich, I shall let you tell your Surrey story.
Cool. Thanks,
James. Take over the screen.
Thanks. So I've got some slides I'll share. I think I'll pick up on your point about Taylor Swift, James, if I may. I wasn't expecting to talk about Taylor on this webinar, but I think
We're not
that's
going to debate the albums, Rich. We're not going to do it.
no, we're going to do a ranking. But I think that's an interesting case where a story has picked up and kind of snowballed and grown and like created a very specific narrative that's quite negative and might not actually reflect reality. It's like my daughter's had that album on non-stop and thinks it's the best thing ever. And I've heard it a fair few times too, and it's like it's not bad. It's got some good stuff on it. So yeah, I think storytelling really does touch all aspects of our lives, doesn't it?
Thanks. Yeah, I'll add that onto the next, webinar blurb that we'll do Taylor album reviews as well.
Yeah. I think you'll get the numbers in. Okay. So I'll talk about what I'm here to talk about, which is newsletters. So we have a number of newsletters at Surrey County Council. Our primary resident newsletters, Surrey Matters, which I'll go into more detail about. And newsletters is a channel which I love. It's something that goes direct to people's inboxes. It's something people choose to, for the most part, they choose to sign up for. They should do if they're following GDPR and everything. So it's kind of a captive audience, and it's different from other channels like social media where you're vying for a lot of different attention. When you're in the newsletter, then you're captivating your audience much more. So I've got some numbers around our newsletters at Surrey County Council, and these were some of the numbers that we put into our unaward submissions, which we knew would be kind of eye-catching in the submission, and that's definitely something we kind of were bearing in mind, and I can give you a bit more insight behind some of these numbers, but we wanted them to sound impressive. So we do have about 300,000 email addresses in our database in eShot, which is the newsletter platform that we use. So about a quarter of all residents in Surrey with a 1.2 million population. Surrey Matters as a newsletter most months generates more clicks than a month's worth of organic social media on our corporate Surrey County Council channel. So it's a really powerful way of like driving people to the information that we want them to see. And we did have over 1,000% increase in new subscribers year on year, and I'll break that down in a bit and how we did that. And then the last one, we did a reader survey. We do a reader survey every couple of years for Surrey Matters, and in the last one, 84% of those newsletter subscribers said that Surrey County Council keeps its residents very informed or fairly informed, and that's compared to a 25% standard on YouGov. So we know that our readers of Surrey Matters are kind of our biggest fans of the council. Not all of them think the council is super great, but they're a very informed audience, which is great. Okay, so here's a few shots of our Surrey Matters newsletter. So we send this out once a month. We occasionally do some special issues too. We have Leah in my team's on the call, who's the current editor of Surrey Matters and does an amazing job with it. And I need to mention Holly in my team, who's been the editor over the last couple of years as well. So Leah and Holly are really responsible for a lot of this work that I'm talking about. So give them their dues for sure. We have about 220 subscribers who are residents and about 10,000 staff. A lot of those subscribers are legacy ones. So we managed to lift a library database. So people where they've signed up to become a library member also signed up to Surrey Matters at the same time. So that was the majority of those, which happened about 6 or 7 years ago. And then we built on that from there, and has an average of 50% open rate. So we know about 100,000 people are seeing the content every month, and that's generating that level of clicks. So this kind of our top level strategy. I won't go into detail around all these points. I do want to talk about ways to increase sign-ups, which I think might be useful for some people. We bear in mind cross promotion across all our newsletter suite as well, and like the user journey. So where those stories are stored in a central place, try and make all those newsletters consistent, and then cross promote between the different newsletters. We also, as I said earlier, that we do resident surveys quite regularly, and we do want to hear what our residents want to hear about, and then we tailor our content to what they want to hear about, which I can go into a bit more detail. Using data in different ways, I'll come to next. And with regards to behaviour change, we're trialling something at the moment around fostering, which is not a standard newsletter, it's an automated newsletter campaign, which kind of drip feeds information to try and encourage behaviour change, in that case around becoming a foster carer. And yeah, content, which is so important to make things that residents want to engage with. So promoting signups. So with that 1000% increase figure, a huge percentage of that is through a pop-up on our website. So we worked with our web team to install a pop-up. So you'll see what that looks like here. It does actually have the Surrey Matters logo on it now, the current one. And it was hugely effective. So it took a little bit of back and forth and persuading the web team that this was a good idea. But just having that pop up on the website, it doesn't appear every single time you go on the website. There's an algorithm behind how often it displays. But having that there generates on average around 1,000 subscribers a month, and it's free. So that's a really excellent way of promoting pop-ups. So promoting sign-ups. So if that's not something you have at the moment, speak to your web teams and get that in place. We don't just signpost to our Surrey Matters newsletter. We signpost to our, you see on the left-hand side, our global sign-up form. So that's a way of putting your details in. It signs you up to Surrey Matters, and you can sign up to other newsletters that you might be interested in at the same time. So another thing we do is look at what data sources are available. So I said that a lot of our Surrey Matters subscribers came from a library database. We have also found other databases that we can make use of. So for a highways newsletter, we found a database of 40,000 email addresses who had contacted the customer services team about a highways issue. And we found a way, working with information governance, to be able to email them and encourage them to sign up to our highways newsletter. So we didn't all make them sign up, but we found a way to do it around all the GDPR rules, way to email 40,000 people, encourage sign up to that newsletter, and about a quarter of them did. So we had about 10,000 sign-ups off the back of that, which was excellent. So understanding what data you have is so important. Another example is some staff had signed up, but we didn't dictate that all staff signed up. But again, working with information governance, we could automatically sign up all staff because we thought it was relevant for all Surrey County Council staff, a lot of which are Surrey residents, but even those that are not, Surrey Matters is a really important way of keeping people up to date. So that is an email consisting of 10,000 or so email addresses each month, which we have loaded into the system and automatically send Surrey Matters to them. And there's some other stuff we've done around promoting sign-ups, working with the customer services team to make sure that the sign-up journey is within their script. So when they're talking to customers on the phone, they're also saying, oh, have you signed up to our highways newsletter, or have you signed up to our Surrey Matters newsletter? And then capturing that data there, because that's exactly the audience we want to reach. And also briefing our library staff. So when residents come in talking to staff about anything, they can then signpost them towards Surrey Matters and having QR codes and things to encourage sign-ups. So those are kind of the main ways that we have generated that 1,000% sign-up, but definitely that the pop-up is probably the single most successful one. Then on top of that, we do have standard comms tactics around printed materials and social media promotion. And none of the social media has been paid for. It's all been organic, but on the numbers is the other things that really generate most of those signups. So this is our kind of top level strategy around our content for Surrey Matters. So we want to focus on stories from real people and places, pretty much exclusively where we can help it. We use real imagery and videos. We don't want to fill it with stock imagery. We know that doesn't engage people. The use of a subject line in the email, I didn't realise until I took over Surrey Matters how important that was. And we spend time tailoring that subject line because it makes such a massive difference to how many people open the email address, how many people open the newsletter, sorry. By just having a good subject line. And it doesn't have to be your top stories or what you think are the biggest priorities. You just need to find something that will be most interesting for people. We schedule the content for Surrey Matters as a team each month and look at what the corporate priorities are and what other things are that we want to tell residents about, and also other things that are happening that residents might be interested in, and kind of layer all of that try to make it in a sensible order in the newsletter. So it's not just priority, 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 and then other stuff. So we kind of mix it up a bit. We've done some themed issues. So we had an issue earlier this year around local government reorganisation, or LGR, which I think was our single most opened newsletter issue ever, which was great, where we wrapped up all that kind of LGR information in one issue that went out in the middle of the month. And we also do A/B testing, which I'll give you an example of in a minute. So I want to give a few examples of some of the kinds of content that we put in Surrey Matters. So this is a story about our amazing Maria, who's one of the comms managers in the Fire and Rescue Service, and she's also an on-call firefighter. So recruiting on-call firefighters is a big priority for us. It's really hard to recruit on-call firefighters. In the past, we would have articles just saying like the benefits of being an on-call firefighter, how you become one, like FAQs, but we try and make things much more case study based. So it's really handy having Maria in the team in this example, that we could just ask her to do kind of a day in the life case study, ask her some questions about being an on-call firefighter, and then have the call to action about how you can find out more about the role at the end. And then that's a much more engaging story for people, whether they're interested in that or not, or they think they might not be, but it's making it much more relatable. This is another example which is all around communities. So we know our residents care about communities that they live in and different parts of the county. So we created an article which is focused on a different part of Surrey each month, and we try and mix up the content so it's not just council focused boring stuff in the article. We try and pull out some interesting things from that area. So whether it's filming locations in an area, or there's a nice walk or something you can do with the family, and then mix that up with, and we also have a library in this area, or we have this new youth centre opening that the council's been involved with. So it's kind of a way of slipping in our priorities in something that residents are really interested in hearing about and kind of non-councilly. And these articles always get one of the top most clicked posts each month. So they've become really popular and a good way of kind of slipping in that priority messaging. And then once we've got that story, then we can promote it in different ways. So in the middle, there's a reel that we put out about one of the hidden Surreys on Instagram, which performed really well. It's another way of driving people to that information. This is an example of some prevention messaging that we've done around wildfires. So in the past, our approach to putting a wildfire article together would be, okay, what's the key messaging? We need to tell people about how to prevent wildfires, and would build the article around that. What we're trying to move to is something that is much more engaging and kind of newsworthy and relevant. So the example article on the left, we basically made it a news article about these are the wildfires that have happened in Surrey over the summer of this year. So made it really visual, talked about how they started, kind of the impact, how we put them out, how we dealt with it. And then further down, then we talk about prevention messaging, about how you can stop wildfires in the future. So we're really happy with that approach, we wanted to do some testing to see how the kind of newsworthy article compares to a normal prevention messaging article. So what you'll see on the right hand side are how the two articles looked when we A/B tested them. So on the left, we made the wording much more keep Surrey prepared by talking about what I'd fire risks. It's the kind of wording we would use in the past for this kind of article. And then on the right, something much more newsworthy that's first and foremost like updates on fires in Hankley Common near Chobham. And the results of that were the kind of newsworthy approach got 4 times as many clicks as the standard prevention messaging first kind of approach. So we kind of try and take that philosophy forward in all the content we put out. So the last thing I wanted to cover is our top articles of the year. So I know it's tiny, but on the right hand side is a whole issue of Surrey Matters. So it covers loads of different articles. So things for families, LGR, it's got stuff around staff abuse, youth collective things where Surrey's invested. So that's what a fairly standard issue looks like. But when we put our list together of our top articles of the year, doesn't necessarily reflect that content. I think 6 out of the 10 relate to closures on the A3, which are not huge council priorities. They're things that it's important that we let residents know about, and we put lots of different comms out around those. But as a corporate comms team, they're not the main priorities of the organisation. But we know that is what people are interested in. So we're not disheartened that most people are clicking on A3 closures. We just try and use it to our advantage. So we'll put A3 closures in the subject line. One's talking about how important the subject line is. And then we'll kind of bury those articles within the newsletter, because we know from experience now that people find these things. So you see the little red box right down at the bottom. That's where the A3 closure appears. So we've got kind of an other highlight section where we just have a list of normally to press releases or to web pages. You sneak A3 weekend closures right down there, and then people have to scroll through the rest of your content, and whether they choose to read it or not is fine, but we know people are clicking on it right down at the bottom. And then in that list, we do have some other priorities. So article on local government reorganisation was one of the most clicked on articles. And what's quite encouraging is the last article called Delivering for Surrey, which kind of wraps up all of the ways the council is investing in different services in communities. So it's the top article you see in the example that's made it into the top 10 list. But it's really by understanding what people want to actually hear about and then trying to use that to your advantage. So I hope that was useful as kind of a few examples of where we work with newsletters, and thanks so much for your time.
No, well, thank you, Rich. That was fantastic. Thank you so much. Yeah, just a brilliant example, really, I think, of, you know, how story hunting, storytelling is helping you to drive those outcomes. But, you know, the numbers are super impressive. But I think also as well, the way you're kind of feeding your insight and the data back in as well, and making sure that that content is always what people want, you know, and is always, you know, the content that people are going to come to. And of course, well, like you say, death, taxes, roadworks, you know, it's one of their guarantees, isn't it, really, as well, for road closures.
It sells.
Well, yeah, exactly. And you'll be delighted to know that you probably didn't come here expecting to get sign-ups from all over the country, but certainly in the chat that, yeah, people are saying they're going to be signing up to your Surrey newsletters, even from other parts of the country. So there you go. You're gathering subscribers as we speak. Leah is also doing a fantastic job in answering some of the questions in the chat. So thanks, Leah, just around who your provider is and where people can get previous emails and stuff like that. But thank you to everyone else for all the other questions. We will come back to them, I promise you. Yeah, really appreciate all those questions and comments coming in. But yes, I think we shall go and speak to Darren now, because as I mentioned at the start, so last year, Surrey's brilliant work won them an award for the best use of email. So that was last year. But Darren, time to bring a bit of award glitz and glamour, because it's unaward season right now, isn't it? The most wonderful time of the year.
It's almost like I've paid you to say that, isn't it?
I've got the script here. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, James. No, absolutely. And I love this time of year. Well, I don't love the weather, but I love this time of year work-wise, because yeah, it's really exciting. So if anybody's new to the Unawards, they're in their 10th year, so it's our 10th anniversary. And I guess they've got quite big in their own way over the years. So we had 600 entries last year, which for the judges, and I don't judge, for the judges, that's a lot of work. Some of the categories get a lot of entries, 40, 50, 60 entries. So it's really popular. And I suppose the thing to say is they're designed to be the most accessible communications awards there are. So they're free to enter. They're simple to enter. It's a really simple form, and you can enter multiple categories on one form as well, which I think is really handy, because actually, you know, Rich may have done some work around, great use of email, but he might also put it into best creative comms, best campaign. So if you're going to the trouble of entering, and you should, don't just enter one category, enter 3, 4 or 5. So there are 22 categories in total. So there literally is hopefully something for everyone. There's a brand new category this year, which is best use of AI. So that's going to be interesting to see what comes into that category. And yeah, so they close in 12 days time, which is absolutely stacks of time, because I've got a graph from last year, which shows the unaward entries, steady flow each day. And then the last 2 days happens, and there's this massive big jump, and over 50% of the entries land in the last 48 hours. And this is why I never extend the deadline, because it doesn't matter what the deadline is, they'll always come in the last 48 hours. So, and famously, the famous Rob from Gedling Borough Council entered with 30 minutes to go one year, and he won best small team for him and his team. So no matter how late it is before the deadline, don't think you can't enter and do well, because you absolutely can. I'm not recommending that approach, because, do it the day before perhaps, but absolutely don't be put off by, a looming deadline. And I think as comms people, we often work quite well to deadlines, don't we? So they close on Tuesday, the 28th of October at midnight. And because I'm a very sad man, I stay up and watch the entries coming in to see who's the latest to land in with an entry. And the record is 30 seconds before the deadline. So if anybody can top that this year, there'll be a prize. And of course, there's always people then, I did have a PR agency last year who 2 days after the deadline said, oh, I know we're a bit late, but could we just drop these through later on today? And absolutely not. They've already gone to the judges. This is a slick operation, so absolutely not. And I think in terms of, top tips, I mean, you've just seen, Exhibit A from Rich as a case study of how to put together a brilliant entry, because, I mean, it's fantastic work anyway. The numbers are compelling, aren't they? I mean, why would you not do email when you see a case study like that? But it was the storytelling, and, I don't do the judging. I know we've got Sadie from eShots on the call today. Sadie was one of the judges for that category. And I don't know if Sadie wants to say a few words on it, because she was one of the judges, literally. But it told a story, and, it got all the key information in. It got it up top. It talks about the numbers. It made a compelling story for why it should win. And, it's a brilliant piece of work and a story well told, which I guess is why you asked Rich onto the webinar today, isn't it, James? But I don't know if Sadie's got anything to add to that, just in terms of, as a judge, what a judge would look for. Because I say I don't judge because I'm too close to these things. But yeah, I don't know if Sadie could say a few words on that particular entry and why it won.
I am just going to see if we can unmute her if she's there. And sorry, Sadie, if you are trying to talk. Oh, there we go. Try that.
Thank you very much, James. Well, I turn my camera on as well. Yeah, no, I mean, just from what Richard's been saying, you can see how compelling their entry was last year. There was no arguing with the numbers. Quarter of Surrey residents getting involved, um, and the fact that they were responding to the requirements of the residents as well was something that really stood out. So yeah, no, it was a undeniable winner of last year.
Thanks, Sadie. Yeah, and I think the other thing, having looked back at Rich's entry, and Darren, you know, I'll give a shout out to Comms Files here. If you've not discovered Comms Files yet, so all of the entries that are put into the unawards are available in this amazing database called Comms Files, and we'll share the address in the chat if you've not seen it before. And that is an incredible, you know, library and resource of just amazing work. So it's not just the winners, it's I think, Darren, every entry, am I right in saying, that's put in goes into that database?
Pretty much all, yeah. There's a little tick box on the entry form. There might be some, you know, delicate information or data in some entries, and therefore people don't want that public. But yeah, vast majority. I think we've got over 1,600 now in Comms Files, not just an awards entries, but, you know, campaign materials, visuals, ideas, data, insights. So yeah, what we always say, not just for unawards, but for all things work, really, you know, never start from scratch, always have a look, because probably someone somewhere else has done something similar and you can learn from their work. So yeah, do check out Comms Files. I'll put the link in the chat in a moment. But yeah, absolutely have a look there.
Yeah, and it's, you know, yeah, so many times that, you know, I've kind of been there and just, yeah, like you say, like, you're not starting from scratch, and certainly you'll be able to see Rich's and Surrey's entry in there to sort of take a look at that, but obviously sort of look at previous other entries as well. And I think the other thing I'd definitely say about the unawards, you know, is that because it's free to enter, you know, and because you know, it's so accessible to everyone. I think the credibility of them, Darren, I know you perhaps wouldn't say this, but I think the credibility of them is just so much higher than other awards where they're hoping you pay to turn up, or they're hoping to pay that you know, you come through the door and enter your work as well. So yeah, they're fantastic. If you've not been involved with them before, if you've not entered before, I really would, yeah, urge you to put an entry in. I've been ridiculously giddy at the couple of times that an unawards entry has paid off. You know, but when I was both working in house and then outside as well. So yeah, I really urge you to do it. And it's a great day as well on December which day, Darren, was it the awards?
Yeah, it's always the first Friday of December, and yeah, and it's during the day. And famously, one year somebody messaged me to say, my boss wants to know, is this a work thing? It's absolutely a work thing. It just happens to take place in a really trendy cinema. And yes, we do watch a film after the ceremony as well, because, well, we're in a cinema. So yeah, and I should have said thanks for the prompt. Yeah, it's always a sellout. So if people want to be there, do get your tickets, and it's 30 quid a ticket. So we try and keep that really accessible as well.
And Rich, just in terms of winning the email award last year, kind of what did that do for your team, and kind of how was it received at your end?
Yeah, it was a really great reflection of the team's hard work over the last couple of years and the kind of focus that we put into newsletters and Surrey Matters in particular. So as a team, it's like really galvanizing. But it was also something that was mentioned at our full council meeting. So we've got a cabinet member who is very keen on email as a media and always championing it, which is really useful to have. So it's been highlighted in other areas outside of comms as well, and kind of helps us be seen as a really like professional team within the council. So yeah, we're just preparing our awards for this year, which we haven't submitted yet, Darren. Will be one of the last minute ones like everyone else. So I don't want you to sell it too much to everyone else, because we don't want that much competition. But yeah, we're putting ours together now.
There we go. Well, there'll be some competition then by the sound of it. But no, that shouldn't stop anyone doing the same. Absolutely go for it. We've got about 15 minutes left, and there's some great questions coming in. So I'm going to start to go through those, if that's all right. I'm going to start with one that came in from Stephanie, which I think is probably like the classic question really around finding stories, sourcing stories, and using them in the way that you guys have been doing that, Rich. I was on a webinar earlier this year, actually, where they did a poll around, like, what are the barriers, what are the biggest barriers you find to storytelling and finding great stories? And time, and cooperation of people were the sort of two that came out, far ahead of anything else. And Stephanie's asked the question around how many people have you got working on stories for the newsletter? And then how do you kind of make sure they're all approved and through the editors in time for each edition?
So it's definitely a group effort across the whole comms team. So our comms team in Surrey is kind of split into mini comms teams based on subject area. So we've got a little fire and rescue comms team, children's, adults, etc. So they're the ones working closely with the services and understand what the priorities are in their areas. And then they feed in articles centrally into us and into Leah. And then we look at all those stories and kind of decide which ones to include. We can't always include everything because we've got a big list. And then we work with those teams on the kind of content and what would be a good story, a good article, and whether that's using something around a case study and challenging them to try and find case studies, or sometimes people come with case studies or with a clear idea. So it's really working with those people within the teams to help them build those and shape those articles. So we've probably got like 10 people that are writing most of the articles, and then Leah and others in my team are writing some of those as well. So yeah, I hope that answers it.
So there's always people. So it sounds like you're almost operating it. It's almost a news desk style operation there, with people sort of coming with stuff, but you also asking for stuff back as well. A sort of real sort of story finding and story hunting mindset there. Is that something you talk about as a team? Do you kind of talk about this, this story sense, this story mindset, and those kind of really being important to feeding the newsletter and all your other comms as well?
Yeah, we definitely do, because as I say, in the past, for many years, with something like Surrey Matters, people would just write an article, put it on the website, it tells you what you need to know about the thing, and then you put it in the newsletter and people hear it, and then you expect people to read it and understand it. But we've really shifted to what is the story here and how are we going to engage people to find out that information that we want them to take away. So it really has flipped as a team, and across the whole team, that's the way people are thinking now. So we've got, this is the topic that we want to tell people about, this is the channel, and what's the best way of doing that. And it's the same with doing something for social media, whether that's organic social media or paid social media. What is the best way to produce content that is going to engage people? And that's usually through finding real people and real places.
Well, the numbers are certainly bearing that out, I think, without a doubt. Yeah. And I just thought it was really impressive, what you said about, dealing exclusively in stories and case studies if you possibly can, genuine pictures, genuine video images, all of that stuff as well. That's a super committed effort, I think, isn't it, to doing that? And as I say, the kind of results are obviously showing that. A couple of questions that came in at the start. One was around translations. Do you do translated newsletters at all?
We don't. I saw that question and I don't know if I know the answer. We don't do translated newsletters. I know our web pages have the facility to, you can translate into different languages is built into the website. I'm not quite sure about the newsletters, but maybe Sadie knows, as she's here from eShot, if there's a way of doing it. I'm not sure.
There absolutely is an eShop, but I can't obviously speak for lots of other people. So yes, if you want to do translated newsletters, Rich, just let us know and we'll sort that out for you.
Interesting. Yeah, it's not something that I'm aware of that we've had requested.
Okay.
So yeah, interesting.
Cool, thanks, Rich. There are a couple of people, Alex and Andrew, were particularly interested in how you managed to get your teams, your legal teams in particular, able or sort of sharing the rationale for borrowing that data across functions. If there's a particularly long answer for this, then we might be able to follow up with this. But yeah, if you're able to touch on that.
Yeah, I mean, it is a challenge. What helped in the case of the highways example I mentioned is that we had a very persistent cabinet member who could help open some doors for us that would be quite tricky just as a service. So it's like finding the right advocates is a really useful way. But we obviously, all of this stuff we've done completely above board, legal way, following all due process and everything. But sometimes it just takes a bit of work to find different ways of doing things that are outside of some people's comfort zones, but still completely legal and safe and like the right thing to do. So that highways example is working with the service, understanding what data they're holding that might be useful for us, then working with the information governance team that they've got this data. Is there a way we can use it? Oh no, I don't think so. And then you get to the point of, well, yeah, you can. There's a way you can email them. In that case, in the email, we had to say, if you don't want us to hold your information about you anymore, then click this button or email us back. So there's things we had to do, but then within that, then we could get around the newsletter and the sign up.
Right. Okay. Yeah, and that's why I'm very interested to know. There's obviously some people who've been really advocates for that as well, and really strong advocates. And I'm assuming now the success really is kind of feeding itself, and that there's kind of people would always be trying to help, and it's particularly interesting, I think, what you said about the scripts that you've also worked on with customer services and libraries, and just making sure it's embedded right across all touch points, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we mapped out all the touch points, how residents contact the council, and then we made sure we got it in there somehow or another.
I think there was a question that was kind of linked to those lists as well, that kind of transfer of lists. I think Rebecca had a question. Do you have an idea of the conversion rate from the residents you emailed from that highways list, that 40,000 highways list that you spoke about?
Yeah, so from that 40,000 people emailed, we had 10,000 people sign up. So really successful.
So worth discovering that list by the sound of it. Yeah. Question from Jane: are many of your councillors signed up to your newsletter?
Similar to staff, you are allowed to automatically sign them up with their council email address. So we add them in and make sure they get it.
That's good to know as well. I think, like I say, Leah's been doing a great job in answering questions around other things, I think, in there, and supplying your sign-up links to everyone so that you'll be getting lots of new subscribers. Darren, I was just going to ask you a question, just coming back to the unawards and the storytelling theme, and kind of how that played out for Surrey last year, and just kind of how sort of important storytelling is in amongst the entries that people are going to write and that story they're trying to tell. Because I mean, it really was apparent, I think, in last year's it was early this year, wasn't it, in the showcase that you held at the masterclass, that whether it was video, whether it was strategy, whether it was social, email, storytelling just came across so strongly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's vital, isn't it? And you've got to think of it from the judge's perspective. If you're a judge and you've got 50 entries to go through, I mean, it takes a long time, doesn't it? And I think, less is more, isn't it, always with these things? But I think we ran a webinar on this a few weeks back. I'll dig out the link if it's useful, with judges sharing some of their top tips. But storytelling ran as a theme all the way through it. And, so tell the story, but tell it up top as well, because you've got to grab people's attention really quick, haven't you? And yes, they'll read every entry and they won't skip through them quickly. They'll do their jobs properly. But if you are looking at 50 entries, you will be drawn to the ones that instantly jump out as a great story, won't you? And I think about really basic things like use bullet points, really kind of signpost it well, tell that story in your entry. So I think it's vital. I think it's really, really important. And most comms people have got that skill naturally, haven't they? So I think, yeah, use the entry form to your advantage to tell your story, and don't think of it as a kind of dull cut and paste from a report or a document like that. Use it as your opportunity to sell yourself.
Brilliant, thanks, Darren. And just sort of thinking back actually to some of the winners, obviously Surrey, great example of the use of stories within their emails and work. I think I'm just thinking back to some of the winning video entry, just used some really lovely like human stories within that. I think there was a campaign as well where they put in so much work, and I think there might be people from Tower Hamlets on the call, but I think it was the Tower Hamlets campaign where they put in some really hard work to find some really you know, really important stories and local people from their community to help them tell the story in their campaign. So, you know, it was there, you know, throughout every entry. Oh, thanks for sharing the webinar as well. Yeah, that's really worth watching if you're thinking of putting an entry in. I'm aware that, God, we have rapidly come up to 12 o'clock. I think, yeah, thanks to all the input from you, Rich, and you, Darren. We've whizzed up to 12 o'clock. So yeah, I'll just wrap up to make sure that we can all get off in time. But, you know, thank you both very much for your time and for your insights today. You know, really, really appreciate it. And I hope people have found that, you know, useful in terms of going away and having a think about, you know, your use of stories, but obviously in emails as well. If story, gosh, sorry. Oh, there we go. That's what I was looking for. If you or your team are interested in going deeper with your story hunting, then you can find out a bit more about this online course. Plenty more on there about story holders, getting stories from people and telling them in an interesting way. So you can get your name on the wait list there. But Darren, Rich, thanks very much for sharing all your wisdom and insights with us today. And yeah, thanks everyone, and thanks for joining us, and have a great weekend.
Thanks a lot. Thanks everyone.
Thanks everyone.